Happy quarantine, everyone. So, as many of you know, this entire country and practically the whole world has been on lockdown for the past several weeks, months. Who knows how long at this point. So that begs the question, with all this free time, what do we do? Now, one suggestion could be clean the house, like you've been telling yourself to do for the past 4 months. Or you could start that exercise routine you've been meaning to get on. Maybe you could finally spend more time with your family. Personally, I think what is the smartest option? To finally watch movies. Finally go through the watch list that I've been building up for the past 10 years of films that I haven't watched and yet people keep telling me to watch. I can finally watch The Godfather. I can finally watch Apocalypse Now. I can finally watch Funny Games. All these amazing films that I've been putting off for the last, 10 years of my life, I can finally get to because I no longer have to go and see movies in theater. Except Amazon put all of the theater releases on its site, so now I have no excuse to watch the movies. If anything, I have even less excuse than normal because now I don't have to leave my home to go sit in a packed theater with a bunch of gross other humans coughing and chewing on popcorn. Now I actually can sit on my couch or in my chair and put up... What movies are out right now? Sonic movie? That Harrison Ford film with a dog? What even is there to watch? Now, if you're like me, and you just looked at this year's watch list and films set to release in 2020 and saw that the first film of this new decade was the Grudge remake, you may have just thrown out the rest of the year entirely, which is pretty much what I did. So when Amazon announced that it was moving theater films onto its streaming service, my first entire instinct was to disregard all of them as garbage, which is what I did for the first few weeks until I realized that some of them are actually supposed to be good, apparently. And with the service, gaining attention, I guess, they've added even more. What started off as 4 current films that everyone kind of knew about and was planning to see anyway, suddenly expanded to all these random movies I've never heard of. Bloodshot, Call of the Wild, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. What are these movies? Has anyone even heard of some of these? Who the heck was talking about The Way Back? Did anyone care about this film? I didn't. I didn't even know it was a thing. So at this current moment, with films more accessible than ever, and current films especially more accessible than ever, I figured I may as well sit down, watch a few, and tell you if they're worth your time. I figured at least I'll watch the 4 original ones that were put on, which I believe were The Hunt, Onward, Invisible Man, and what was the last one? Emma. I'll watch those 4 over the next few weeks and give you my thoughts and opinions if they're even worthwhile. But Michael, each one of them to rent is $20. How the heck do you expect to pay off? That's $80 in total to watch all 4 of these movies. How can you afford that? Well, you see, with these movies getting put directly on online streaming, it's made it a bit easier to acquire via other methods. But none of that's important right now. I swear it's gotten brighter in here. My whole exposure's going out the window. I've set everything up perfectly, and now everything's just gonna be a giant bright white blob right there, and I hate it. So the first movie I'm watching out of these 4 for this week is The Hunt, directed by Craig Zobel? Craig Zobel? Who the heck's Craig Zobel? I've actually never heard of this man before. Apparently he directed 10 episodes of he directed 1 episode of Westworld. He directed an episode of American Gods. He did a video promo for Iggy Pop. The movie stars Betty Gilpin, Hilary Swank, and no one knows anything attached to this film. Why was this film getting talked about before? What makes this film notable? Well, obviously what makes this film notable was the marketing. Most people didn't really know much about the film or care about it. They just knew of its name because it was being pushed as one of the most controversial films of the year. Quite a statement for it only being March. It got released in March. There ain't a lot of controversies happening by March. It's 3 months in. The controversy comes from the fact that the whole film is about a group of strangers waking up and then proceeding to be hunted and all the people being hunted are right-wing conservatives, and the people hunting them are left-wing liberals. The opposing sides of the political spectrum in America, but one's hunting the other. Now, what's amazing about this controversy is that no one was caring. Did any of you actually sit down and talk to someone about if this movie's right or not? Did anyone actually care if it was controversial? No one cared. No one did. So all this touting about being the most controversial film of the year in the marketing was just made up by Blumhouse, the producers, and to make the movie sell better. And oddly enough, it almost worked on me. The film's premise isn't that unique. If you want to try and make something dark and oppressive and semi-saying something about anything government-related, you could a killing game is one of the simplest ways you could go about it. At this point, it just seems like you can find a killing game on anywhere. The Hunger Games started the trend, and the hunt's only continuing it at this point. The idea of hunting people for sport isn't really that disturbing at this point, I'd say, either. It's been analyzed and done in every form, especially starting with what I believe was one of the original stories popularizing it, The Dangerous Game, which everyone has to at some point read in high school. So really, this movie's premise isn't saying anything, or doing anything, or there's nothing special shown in the movie, and I think they recognized that by the fact that they were trying to tout it as being controversial, which, as we also then saw, that it really wasn't. So in the end, this movie comes out on March 13th, relatively the same week. The whole country goes into crisis mode, and the film gets put up on Amazon alongside The Invisible Man and Onward, two other films people were actually looking forward to. So I mentioned that this film's marketing almost worked on me, and that's not because I felt the film was clever or interesting through its marketing in any way, shape, or form. It just seemed like the movie was going to be stupid enough to be entertaining. It'll probably be very on the nose, very surface level, and it'll just make way for some fun gore. And that's pretty much what I thought going into the film. And you know what? That was pretty dang accurate. In the form of political dialogue between the left and right, there's not much there, although I'd be amazed if you actually expected anything. One of the more surprising aspects of it was actually how stereotyping it was of both the right and the left. Throughout most of the film, you get little splurts of dialogue from both sides that are pretty stereotypical or general things that both sides say. Like, at one point, someone calls someone else a snowflake. The hunters to get any opportunity they can to call someone out on gendering or cultural appropriation. Going into the film, I thought it was going to paint the right as the innocent and the right who are being oppressed by the evils of the left, who are trying to use any means necessary to shut down the right from their different points of views. But oddly enough, it just takes two caricatures of the left and right and makes them both parties, with the only real person who doesn't fit into either being the main character, who's this girl who is absolutely perfect at surviving everything and is the absolute best fighter. She's a fighting genius, almost to a level that shouldn't be possible. It feels so illogical for someone like this to exist and be in this situation, which weirdly saves most of the movie. Without her, I think if they tried to make any other main character, either some kind of stupid protagonist who keeps wandering around and getting themselves killed like any other generic horror movie, or the opposite where it's someone who is really good as her, but spouting the innocence of the right and her side. If they had done anything remotely like those two, which is what I thought the main character was going to be, the movie would have fallen flat on its face. But because of her determination to not care about anything other than surviving, it makes any scene with her incredibly fun and entertaining. That said, if you actually want to break down the movie as a story, the writing's pretty garbage. I mentioned before that both sides of this movie are made up of caricatures that are supposed to represent both sides of the political spectrum. And while characters like that can be pretty solid and entertaining in comedy films, or especially satire films, in actually telling a movie that's trying to be semi-tense and horror-related doesn't really work as effectively. Most of the characters in this film are incredibly one-note, and you're pretty much done with them after the first 5 minutes. In some ways this works because they're never on screen too long to become annoying, So weirdly enough, the film actually gets the amount of time that they need to be on before the audience can get tired of them. Just right, pretty much. You know them for a little bit, and then they're gone. Then never to be referenced again, or never seen again. And it really does stop on them being just annoying or uninteresting and boring. Because of this, the film does have an incredibly high death count. I can't wait to see Dead Meat do a kill count on this film if they haven't already. And with these deaths, it usually goes for a dark comedy approach. It's really hard to actually predict who's going to live and who's going to die for the most part, especially in the first half of the film, where out of nowhere things can just come and take someone out. And it leads to some very shocking and even kind of hilarious moments where you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming at all. And so it keeps jumping from character to character, which keeps you guessing on who we're going to be following from this next little bit, and who's going to be gonna make it to the end, and who's going to be our main character. And so it really keeps you on your toes in a surprisingly effective way, at least until you get the punchline. I don't know about others, but for me, after the first 2 or 3 deaths or so, I really figured it out and was able to predict really ahead of time who was staying and who wasn't. Maybe that was the purpose, but I feel like the gag that was really funny and surprising at first fell flat really, really quickly. And that led to the next 20 to 30 minutes not being boring, as I initially want to say, but just less interesting than it could have been. Actually, we should probably delve more into the characters and talk about the actual actors. The only real performance in this movie that stuck with me is the one by the main female lead, Betty Gilpin. And she, like I said before, has this really good stoic, stone-faced, I'm getting through this and I don't care about anyone else mentality in the film, and it works incredibly well in the setting. But other than that, they're playing one-note caricatures. I mean, I'm not going to judge the whole acting career on it, but nothing really landed. There are a few scenes of dialogue or moments that I was like, hey, that was really good, but nothing to stick with me or make me go looking for these people again. You can find probably a lot of similarities to these characters on anything else that makes fun of either rednecks or liberals or anything. It's nothing really special about it, is I guess the point I'm trying to get across. Weirdly, nothing being special about it comes through in a lot of other areas about the film. The editing in the film is alright. There's nothing that especially stood out to me, so it was solid. The cinematography has a couple really cool moments in the action, but in dialogue it tends to be very still and boring. Any animation they had was pretty much just used on CGI to do blood and gore, and while it's not bad, it's definitely a little bit cheesy, but I think that might have also been intentional because a lot of the deaths are brutal but kind of silly at the same time. At this point, there's not too much else I can say about the film without going into spoiler territory, so for those of you who've watched the film and are curious on my opinions on them, stick around. For those who just want to see my final verdict, go to this timestamp. Alright, good. Let's talk about spoilers. So I think the point that I should talk about the most is the big plot twist of the film, which is, as we suspect at the beginning of the movie, is just a bunch of liberals killing off conservatives for the fun of it, because they hate them and want to get rid of them. But what you actually realize by the end of the film is that there's this whole conspiracy that there are a group of people, a bunch of liberals and powerful liberals, taking conservatives and right-wing activists and killing them for sport. And this was a big controversy in the world. And this one group of people in a text chain that we see at the beginning of the film make a joke about it, which then gets released to the public, and a bunch of conspiracy theorists actually believe it's true, resulting in each person in that text chain getting fired. What we then see is that in an effort to get revenge for them losing their jobs over a joke, they actually take a bunch of the people who were spouting these conspiracy theories and kidnap them and put them in the game to get revenge. In an effort, they were trying to take the lies that they believed were real and make them real. Some kind of weird, backwards, this'll teach you for spreading lies kind of lesson. And I don't completely hate the plot twist, but I don't feel anything towards it. I can see that they were trying to go for this kind of reverse situation where usually it's touted off that people being on the left are a lot more politically sensitive, and that's why they're called snowflakes and nicknamed all that. In this case, it's the reverse though. The conservatives were the one who couldn't identify it was a joke and took it too seriously, and the liberals were the ones trying to get back at them for it. So I think it's kind of an interesting idea in a way of trying to reverse that and maybe try and show some similarities between the far left and the far right. But the film is so weak on its political conversation to begin with that it really just comes off as a lazy way of trying to have some form of a plot twist in the film. And I don't think it's helped by the way that they actually reveal the plot twist. The way it plays out is once all of the hunters are gone except for the lead girl, who is played by Hilary Swank, I believe is what her name was. Yeah, Hilary Swank. She plays Athena, the main antagonist. So once she's the only one left, we get a flashback to a year ago when we see this text chain get released and her coworkers get fired for making this joke and then decide to begin to make it actually real, to create the manor, to get a bunch of people down and to kill them. And the whole scene of itself and the flashback just feel so out of place. Like they just suddenly change off from Crystal, or whatever the main character's name is, killing off all these guys and suddenly switching to a year ago. And then after that scene happens, and Crystal makes it to the Athena, the main antagonist, Hilary's house, they both have their one-on-one face-off. Athena then explains her whole motive for doing this. And so they show us what happens, and then the next scene, they explain it. We get told the backstory twice, and it's really annoying, because it just feels like the movie saying, okay, we just want to make sure you understand what's going on. We're not sure that you actually fully grasp what we're doing, and so this is what we're doing. Isn't that clever? Isn't that clever? And it feels weirdly insulting to be shown the motive and the backstory this way. I honestly would have preferred if they just cut out that 10-15 minute scene of the flashback and just had the conversation, and I think that would have been fine. Hilary and Betty's acting were strong enough, I think, in that final confrontation to hold the scene together and for it to work instead of having to be shown it. I think this really just falls through on weak scripting is what it is. They realized that they didn't have enough time in what they had and added just another scene of them reinstating what was going on to make it to that 1 hour 30-minute mark. I mean, it's a Blumhouse picture. What do you expect? For every 5 garbage movies they put out, they make 1 good movie. I don't know what you're expecting from them at this point. They made Fantasy Island this year. Who in their right mind wanted to watch Fantasy Island? One of the more interesting parts I do think about the film is actually Athena's character, only because she's pretty close to Crystal in that she really actually doesn't have a massive political grudge against the conservatives. She doesn't just want to kill them because she thinks they're conservative and bad like a bunch of the other characters come across in this film. She wants it because of the revenge of losing her job over a joke, which is a really stupid motivation, I'll be honest. I can't say it without, gagging a little bit in the back of my mind. But her whole character then contrasts really well against Crystal, who is just trying to survive. They're both characters that are extremely full of themselves, but Athena's acting in anger of revenge of losing her job, and then Crystal's acting to get revenge of being hunted. It's really weird. I kind of like it, but at the same time, there's nothing more to it than that. So any bits of positivity I give it kind of end there. After that, it just becomes incredibly surface level and weak writing. The final fight between them is pretty cool. It takes place in the stereotypical rich person's getaway home with a bunch of random antiques and knickknacks that no one has business owning unless they have money to throw away. The fight pretty much involves every single one of them. It's really silly. At one point, Crystal tries to swing away on a piece of rope that's just randomly hanging from the ceiling for decoration, and then she falls onto a bunch of random glass structures. She throws Athena through a fake fireplace that's in the wall. At one point, they throw a portable speaker at each other that's playing Beethoven music. It gets really ridiculous. But the actual final death of killing Athena was really underwhelming, I felt. And then Crystal's escape and survival get away, and the ending really has no footing to land on. I think it's really obvious the writers didn't know how to end this film aside from killing Athena. So Crystal just gets up, heals her wound, gets in a nice dress, takes the dog for a walk, and then just takes a random jet plane Athena still had there to go back home, and that's how the film ends. And I guess that kind of sums up most of the film. A large amount of the film is pretty weak. You get these little interactions of a character saying stereotypical right-wing or left-wing things, and then someone dies, really bloody, and then they say something else more stereotypical and silly, and then they die, and once things start slowing out, you suddenly get past all this blood and gore that's supposed to be really fun, and for the most part is, and you really just sit there and see what an incredibly weak script that they were dealing with is. That said, and I don't want to come off as I hate this movie, because I actually kind of enjoyed it, is the weird thing in all of this. There's so much just random blood and gore and death, and all done in the silliest and fun way possible. It's just pure blind stupid fun. It's one of those films that I think just saves itself by being just fun enough that you kind of forget how meh the actual overall product is. That said, it's still not good enough to save it from being a meh film at the end. There are movies that have done stupid, bloody gore fun a lot better. I mean, the Kill Bill movies are the two best examples of that, and I think that's pretty obvious. But if you want to go even further than that, well, pretty much all but one of the Friday the 13th movies are in the same vein as this film, and Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is another good example, and I would argue most of those are better and more well written with a stronger story. At the end of the day, The Hunt's not really anything special, but it's fun enough that it almost makes it worthwhile to watch. It's one of those films that just kind of hits right in the middle for me, and so because of that, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. You're not going to come out of the film loving it, but you're probably not going to hate it either. You're going to at least have somewhat of a good time. And you know what? In this time, in this crisis, sometimes that's all you need. Well, that's the first of the Amazon 4 streaming movies out of the way. Next week I'll be talking about The Invisible Man, a film that got a surprising amount of positive reception to me. I honestly expected it to be garbage, but everyone's saying it's good, so I'm kind of looking forward to this one. If there's any other films you guys want to see me review, leave suggestions below. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more and to catch the next videos. If you want to see other films that I've reviewed and my opinions on them that I haven't put in video form, I'll leave a link to my Letterboxd down below so you can go through my whole filmography and judge me for however you wish. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have a good and safe quarantine.